Yeah, welcome back to the Center Square Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. A measure giving Illinois voters the opportunity to consider a millionaires tax one step closer to the ballot in November. The House Joint Resolution Constitutional Amendment 21, it would raise the tax rate on income more than $1 million from 4.95% to 7.95%. Here's bill sponsor, Chicago Democratic State Representative LaShawn Ford, explaining where that money would ultimately go.
Of the revenue collected, 50% shall be used to provide property tax relief in all communities. 50% shall be distributed to school districts solely on a per pupil basis.
Now, the proposed amendment popped up in front of legislators late Tuesday after majority Democrats waived posting requirements to hear the bills in committee immediately. Republican State Representative Stephen Reich had a series of questions, including how half of the $2.2 billion in more tax money from taxing millionaires would ultimately impact schools.
You're not giving us, or the voters in this case, a clue as to how this is going to have an effect upon their particular school district. And another question is this going to apply to charter schools? Is this going to apply to private schools, or is this only public schools?
Well, we really can't get there until we adopt the amendment, and then we could work on implementation. That's what the constitutional amendment will allow.
Now, Reich also said he thinks this runs afoul with the state's flat tax constitutional provision. There was an attempt to change that back in 2020 to have it higher taxes for higher earners, but voters rejected that proposal. Ford says this measure does not impact that flat tax provision.
It doesn't remove our constitutional requirement for the flat tax rate. We tried the progressive tax, that didn't work. This would just be an implementation of the 3%. On income above $1 million. So we still have our constitutional obligation to tax at the flat rate, keeping the personal and business intact.
I have to say that I find that not a very good answer, because you are creating a second tier of income subject to a higher rate of tax.
Well,
that violates the flat tax provision of the Illinois Constitution.
Now, other criticisms of the measure say it's not tied to inflation. So if you put a dollar amount in the Constitution, you may have to revisit it as inflation continues. More people are going to be hitting that threshold and facing higher taxes. And again, it won't be tied to inflation. Also, as you heard, no real plan on how to administer the $2.2 billion estimated that such a surcharge could impact the state's tax base. But also, the business community urged to have the proposed amendment rejected. Mark Denzler is with the Illinois Manufacturers Association, and he shared his opposition to the bill yesterday.
First, the majority of businesses pay taxes under the individual tax rate. 22,000 companies, according to the IRS, had revenue of $1 million or more, meaning they're going to see potentially a 61% increase in their income tax rate. At the same time, if I heard correctly earlier, there's no guarantee that companies will get a property tax break. So they're going to pay higher income taxes with no guarantee that those companies will also be getting a property tax decrease.
Again, because the measure would split that $2.2 billion with 50% going to public schools, and 50% would go towards residential property tax relief in a state of Illinois that has the highest property taxes in the country. Democrats say this is a tax on the 1% of earners and is needed for schools and for property tax relief. Others, though, say it's really just going to continue forcing higher earners out of the state of Illinois to find other opportunities elsewhere with cheaper tax rates. But Republican State Representative Martin McLaughlin, he said all of this isn't needed. If the state would just pay local governments what they're owed from taxes that the state already collects.
We don't have to change the Constitution. It's called LGDF. We already collect the money. We owe the villages 10%, and the governor's reduced it to 6.2. Step one, restore it to 10%. It immediately reduces municipal taxes. Step two, rinse and repeat. It's like shampoo, simple, easy, and we should be doing it each and every year. So without changing the Constitution, we already have provisions to do this. $1.2 billion to go back into our communities. So I think we all share in the same desire to lower property taxes. I think this is a measure that's going to hurt businesses, and unfortunately I've experienced it personally with too many friends who have left the state and are enjoying North Carolina, Texas, and Florida way too much.
Now, the measure is expected to be on the House floor as early as today. Just getting a note from Jim Talamonte, our reporter in Illinois, saying, yes, indeed, it's being brought up on the House floor. Passes there, goes to the Senate, and if approved by the Senate by May 3rd, it would then appear on the ballot for voters this November. Meanwhile, the Illinois House Ethics and Elections Committee Tuesday had lobbyist Ed Sullivan promoting a bill to allow for elected officials or those seeking office to use campaign funds to pay for private security who can carry firearms.
Under the ethics bill last year, obviously, as it explained, they added the ability for candidates and public officials to use campaign resources to use on security, personal security. One of the things that we're changing here is they did not talk about licensed security. And so what we're doing is adding in the fact that if you're going to have security and spend money, resources, you must use a licensed security agent.
Now, Democratic State Representative Katie Stewart, she wanted to be clear that requirement for certified security wasn't necessary in all instances.
I think it's important, I think everybody understands it, that if you are choosing to pay for security out of your own pocket and not using your campaign funds, this would not apply. This is only if you are using your campaign funds, and I think it makes a lot of sense in either instance to make sure that you find someone who's licensed, but we are not putting that your personal money you can spend however you personally want to spend.
Correct.
Now, this is just a smattering of some of the laws that they're looking to try to implement with the House continuing session today. They're scheduled Thursday. The Senate returns next week. Then it's going to be a mad dash through the end of May to get bills, including the state budget, across the finish line. A few estimates are that they've already approved 500 bills out of either chamber. We'll see just how many bills they approve before the end of legislative session come May 31st. So be sure to get the newsletter in your inbox for free by subscribing at thecentersquare.com.